For your learning work today, you're just going to spend some time going over your review guide, making sure you have the accurate information, and then also doing a little studying. You can do this independently. You can have one of your family members quiz you, or you could have one of your friends or classmates do it as well, just meeting virtually. So the first thing I want you to do is open up your grade depression test review, and then also find a highlighter. Because as we go through this, I want you to highlight anything that either you didn't have filled in that you now are adding information to, or I want you to highlight anything that you change or modify so that you can focus on making sure you understand that material and know that material. So the first part really applies to the Great Depression. The Great Depression had multiple reasons it happened, but the ones that are really the ones we focus on this year are the stock market crash, the bank failures, the underconsumption, which means people were not buying things, and there was a lot of stuff that was produced, the overproduction. Foreign countries were making it difficult to sell in their countries because they were charging high taxes. And then on top of that, countries that owed us money were not able to repay their loans. As a result of this, people had to deal with a lot of effects. They lost their jobs, they lost their land, they lost their life savings, they lost their homes. Families broke apart. Sometimes kids went to orphanages because at least then parents could make sure that they had food. People starved because there wasn't food. People lost their jobs, or if they did get to keep their job, they took pay cuts just to keep having a job. During this time period, Herbert Hoover was president, and while he did many things to try to revive the economy, he was not very successful because he didn't do enough stuff to help people right now. All of his ideas and strategies were to help people in the long run, but nothing that provided emergency relief for people who were desperate at this time. So they voted him, or I should say, they didn't vote him into office again. And when his next re-election came up, the other man won. That man was FDR, also known as Franklin Roosevelt or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When he became president, his first thing that he did was made people have more faith in the banks, and he did that by starting some New Deal programs. You needed to only identify 3 New Deals and describe how they helped the people or the economy. I'm listing all 8 because I cannot be sure which one you did. For the Emergency Relief Act, this provided money to states to help them provide food and assistance to people in need. So this is one that actually got people money right away that needed it right away. The Civilian Conservation Corps provided jobs for young men from all backgrounds, and this was new at the time because a lot of times minorities were not provided jobs, and this is actually a new deal that was created to do that. They focused on more environmental projects like building forests, like replanting them, draining swamps, fighting fires, but they also built roads and trails. And this is also where some of our natural parks were created, not natural, sorry. The Works Progress Administration created 8 million jobs. They built 120,000 public buildings and 500,000 miles of roads, as well as painted murals that were supposed to boost people's morale. So this one really provided a lot of jobs for people. The Social Security Act was a security net for both the elderly and children, where they could get a small amount of money from the government to help tide them over. It also created unemployment so that when people did lose their jobs, they had something they could go to tide them over until they got another job. The Tennessee Valley Authority provided electricity to rural areas for a cheaper price, as well as taught farmers better farming techniques so that things like the Dust Bowl wouldn't happen again. The AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, focused on paying farmers to plant less and breed fewer animals, and this was to try to help regulate the prices of both. They also bought excess food to store it to sell it later when the prices were more stable. The Soil Conservation focused solely on preserving the soil and keeping it where it was, and taught farmers how to create wind blocks, most of the time using some type of tree. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was one that made people feel more confident in the banks. It guaranteed bank deposits up to $2,500 at this time, even though it's higher now. And it helped people just feel like, okay, if I put my money in a bank, it's going to be there when I need it. Part of the reason these New Deals were such a big deal is because a lot of people were living in Hoover Villas, which were basically homeless camps, where people built houses out of whatever they could find. Plastic, there wasn't really a lot of that, sorry. Cardboard, scraps of wood, tin, tar paper. There wasn't electricity. It wasn't very clean. Diseases could spread. It was very little money. It was hard to find food in these camps. And so they were named after the president at the time, President Hoover, because they blamed him for the way that their lives had turned out because of the stock market and his inability at that time to revive the economy. Another thing that was happening at the same time as the Great Depression is the Dust Bowl. And the Dust Bowl was a 10-year time period where drought and poor farming techniques led to horrible dust storms in Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas. You could also say in South Central United States. It affected a lot of people, mostly farmers who lost their land, their crops, their way of life, and had to leave and move somewhere else, as well as their livestock. People lost their homes, their businesses, they got really sick, or they died from inhaling all of that dust. Banks in the areas closed because people were not able to repay their loans. And if they weren't able to repay their loans, they also didn't have money to put in the bank. This applies to stores in the area as well. And ultimately, this contributed to the Great Depression by making it longer and more severe. As we have just finished the very last question on your review guide, remember that you were highlighting as you went through this review guide, so I'd like you to go back and submit this as an assignment again in Schoology, showing me any of the highlighted things that you have now gone back and either added information or filled in information that you did not know. If you've turned it in and you made no corrections to this as we went through the review, you do not have to resubmit your assignment. But if you did make any changes, please submit it so I can see what areas you guys needed a little bit more feedback on, because that also helps me in the future plan what I need to cover more in depth. Also, a reminder that I would like you to study for another 10 to 15 minutes on this before we take your test on Monday and show me what you know. I think one of the most effective ways to do that is to have somebody quiz you and you give them back information. So I highly encourage you to find a friend or a family member that can give you the question and see if you can give them the answer. As always, if you have questions, send me a Schoology message. I will do my very best to respond to you on Friday, but know that I will respond at the very latest to you by Monday morning, depending on how I feel with my COVID shot tomorrow, as in the second vaccination, and I don't know what side effects I will have. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.